Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies, everybody. I'm Jose.
I'm Mike.
And today we're going to talk about Steve Soderbergh's new film called Unsane.
Yeah, so we've watched 3 movies in a row today. So we saw Ready Player One, and then we saw Isle of Dogs, and now we've seen Unsane.
Yes.
Late at night, which I forgot I knew anything about because I knew I'd seen people talking about it a little bit, and obviously the title is idiosyncratic. It's not insane; it's unsane. So I kind of recognised it. But it was only when I got into it that I realised, oh yes, this is the thing I saw the trailer for, the Soderbergh film about the girl who is not meant to be in a mental institution, but she is, and then she kind of goes mental. Or she gets in there and she sees that her stalker is working there.
Yes.
And from the trailer you're going, is he? Is he not? Is she actually paranoid?
Yes.
So the trailer was very, very intriguing.
The trailer made it seem like a horror film with Claire Foy, in which the central nightmare is that this person who's escaping from a stalker actually ends up being committed to an insane asylum where the stalker is her nurse.
Yeah, and the idea is that she shouldn't be in there. She's put in there by mistake.
Yes.
But then when she's in there, all of a sudden she's not going to be able to convince people that she's not insane because her stalker appears to be there.
Yes. Well, actually, the film is more interesting than that in a way, because it's not only that she's not meant to be insane, it's that this hospital has a policy of cheating people on their insurance by committing them when they don't need to be committed, then committing them against their will until their insurance runs out.
Right, yes, that's his kind of secondary sort of aspect to it. So we should say that's really the premise. Obviously, spoilers. We'll be heavy on spoilers from now on. So yeah, there's this aspect of... she meets a character played by Jay Farrow in there, who I know as an impressionist. I didn't know he was doing actually more serious acting.
Right.
And actually, he used to really annoy me when I saw him as an impressionist, and I quite liked him in this. I thought he gave a good performance. He knows the lay of the land, and he takes Claire Foy under his wing and explains that this is an insurance scam, that they will keep her in there until Medicaid or her insurance says we're no longer going to pay for this,
yes.
And then you get out. And also he has a mobile phone.
Yes.
Which she uses.
It's important for the plot. Well, the whole beginning of the film is really interesting because you get the sense that it's a very lonely career woman who actually is very smart and is prey to sexual harassment. You get the sense of her boss kind of trying it on with her, and her being very firm and prim and nonsensical. But also that she's very lonely and isolated. And then as the film unfolds, you realize the reason why she's lonely and isolated is because she's basically moved across country to escape the stalker. So in fact, she doesn't know anybody. So really that phone is a lifeline because, but the beginning scenes are very well handled because you can see how quickly she gets entrapped, right? So, the doctor says, sign this, it's just a boilerplate. And we need it, to finish, or to proceed with. Yeah,
so she's just gone to see a psychologist or psychiatrist for kind of. It's a first meeting, I guess, because then she says at the end, "Oh, could we meet again?" Like I think it's going to help me. Yeah, you're a good listener. And then when she signs this document, it turns out that she's committed herself.
That's right. And then she meets. Then an attendant says, just come this way, it's policy. And then the nurse says, do this, it's policy. And before you know it, she's in a 24-hour stay. And then the 24-hour stay becomes a 7-day stay. So actually, you get the feeling that like she could end up there forever, really. So,
and it's crushing, and you really feel the terror of it. There's really no way out of that. I mean, it's also, you really feel, it's implicit, but you really feel the idea of a catch-22 in there, where the more that you say you're sane, the less they'll believe you.
Yes.
But if you were to then kind of play insane, as it were, you'd stay there.
Though actually, she was so on edge that you could understand also why they'd keep her. Like she assaults 2 people in her first night, and it's a sense of frustration and so on. But nonetheless, right. And
you've also seen from before she got to the hospital, she had a slight episode where she thought she saw a stalker. So she with good reason, she is paranoid.
Yes.
Which is not to say kind of to a mentally ill degree. Like I say,
Yeah.
she's got good reason to be paranoid. She has a stalker.
Anyway,
But
let's not lose sight, because I thought, to me, well, on the one hand, I was bored, and I don't think it's successful. On the other hand, it's kind of like a daring little experiment. Like, it's got so many things that are interesting, right? Like, the shots, the compositions, some of the ways that, like, when she's on drugs, the way that those things are depicted.
that was a great little sequence.
Yeah, so actually it reminds me a little bit of, like, those late 60s horror films that in some ways are not very well realized, but actually have wonderful moments, and, you're kind of, like, riveted to them. It is kind of, one of those termite films that, it's true, that are more interesting.
Is that an actual term, or is that just...
Yeah, no, it's a term. It's a term.
Termite.
Yeah, it's termite cinema, and my mind isn't working very well. It's an American critic from the 1950s who defined the term, and defined it so as to describe how, the real boundaries of art and cinema were often being pushed, not by the grandiose, big budget films, but actually by all the little B movies.
Manny Farber.
Manny Farber, that's right.
Emmanuel Manny Farber. Susan Sontag called him the liveliest, smartest, most original film critic America's ever produced. Let me just see what it says about termite stuff.
And he was the lover, I think, of Robert De Niro's mother. That's a side gossip thing. Who was an artist.
White Elephant Art versus Termite Art. That's an essay that he wrote. It appeared in 1962 in Film Culture. In it, he writes on the virtues of termite art and the excesses of white elephant art, and champions the B film and underappreciated auteurs, which he felt were able, termite-like, to burrow into a topic. Bloated, pretentious white elephant art lacks the economy of expression found in the greatest works of termite art, according to Farber. Termite, tapeworm, fungus, moss art, he contends, goes always forward, eating its own boundaries, and, like as not, leaves nothing in its path other than the signs of eager, industrious, unkempt activity.
Right.
That's quite interesting.
Well, I thought that's a term that applied very well to this film, because you can see in this film how it's a whole bunch of artists who just gathered together, and really it's kind of an experiment. It's a low budget film in which they're trying out very interesting things.
It was shot on an iPhone.
Was it shot on an iPhone?
Yeah, famously, well, I suppose, quote unquote famously, it's one of the notable things about it. It was shot on an iPhone 7 Plus.
Oh, right, okay. Well, that makes more sense, because I was wondering why, the shots looked weird. It was like, there
was wide angle.
It was very wide angled. It looked sometimes like it was a fisheye lens, really.
I think once or twice it gets very close to fisheye.
Yeah, and there were things where, like, the characters' faces were almost at a normal distance, but their hands would look enormous, right? So that makes sense. Anyway, it has this weird kind of dislocated feel to it. It's very poorly lit, right? And you mentioned...
There's one scene in particular where Claire Foy and Jay Farrow are talking, and she is lit, and he is not at all. Which I don't know if that's a limitation of the lighting or a limitation of the phone, but either way, it's just not... It doesn't work.
It's racist, really, because you need to take into account skin color. You can't always sideline black people and kind of just turn them into a block. You couldn't even distinguish his features, for most of the time he was on screen. So, that was a limit to that exercise. It looks really low budget, but it looks really interestingly experimental within that budget. And so, some things work better than others, really. I didn't like the look of it at all.
No, but define like, because I think the look of it suits it.
I think in some ways it suits it, but it's interesting. I didn't know that it was an iPhone film, and now that you mention it, it kind of makes sense. It's an iPhone film, probably using a lot of whatever lights available, because a lot of it feels dark, right, and kind of wide, like overly wide angled. And with the texture of the image, like not very good quality. It lacks kind of density and depth. And my God, if you just think of the Wes Anderson film, right?
Isle of Dogs.
Yeah, there was a pleasure just in the depth of the image, right? Like, whereas this seems very thin, very gray, or like a kind of unsaturated or desaturated color. You
kind of feel like whatever work could have been done to make the image more interesting beyond it's beyond what it came out the camera as has not really been done, or hasn't been improved to its best advantage.
That's right. So I think for me, like, what was interesting to see was there were some really interesting shots and some really interesting compositions, and it did lend it an air of like something abnormal, you know, or
claustrophobic. I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets into you. You really feel Claire Foy's paranoia and kind of increasing mania.
She's great.
And I mean, through the cinematography, though, you know, that kind of, as you say, that the very wide angle stuff early on, before even you get into the hospital, you know, it's all this, as you say, wide angle photography where depth is and size is really emphasized, and it feels very voyeuristic as well. And also, it's the first half of the film is full frame, and that again increases the feeling of claustrophobia, where you're kind of walled off, and it emphasizes verticality in the scene, so you see ceilings all the time, and you're constantly feeling penned in.
Yes, no, it's true, and also that voyeuristic sense. You're often, you know, there's often like reframings within the frame with shutters and people looking on, you know, through windows, or you know, little windows indoors, or so that sense of feeling penned in, of being watched or being stalked. But in this world that's all like gray and thin and you know, and distorted, you know.
I was constantly kind of interested to see where the film would go. I didn't feel I could predict kind of what its next move would be, you know. Like, even when, for instance, the mother gets involved, you kind of go, okay, well, she's going to try and you know, get her daughter out and sort it all out. But even then, I didn't feel I could predict exactly what would happen next. So I was constantly interested in where the plot would go, but on a kind of minute-to-minute basis, the film, once you got into the hospital, at least, the film was very, very boring, I guess, really.
Yes.
Not exciting enough.
I was bored.
On the other hand, I mean, to be fair, a few people left. Probably 4 people left in the cinema, which maybe it was just like they thought it was crap, or thought it was too boring, or it wasn't the kind of film they thought,
or it was
whatever
late,
it was.
or whatever, yeah.
Or also it was a late screening, so maybe they thought it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I would say that if you have personal experience of mental illness or kind of, psychiatric hospitals, or having a stalker, I think this film would really, really speak to you and probably creep you out a lot more effectively than it did you or I. Do you think?
I don't know.
It seems to me a very convincing depiction of the issues that it raises.
I'm not convinced, right? I mean, I thought, well, as a kind of horror film, it worked on me. Like, you know, I think I jumped out of my seat.
You jumped a couple of
times. So that's the thing. I mean, I have mixed feelings about this, because on the one hand, it's a neat experiment, and I loved seeing all the compositions and, you know, kind of that they were doing, and the different types of shots and all of that I loved. Yeah, it's kind of, you thought it was experimental. They were trying something, and it was interesting to see. On the other hand, it scared me, you know, and on the other hand, I was bored. So those are almost like kind of competing, you know, and contradictory feelings, really. I'm not sure I would recommend it to anyone. And actually, I think had I been watching it on my own on TV, I would have turned it off. I would have switched it off. Even though, you know, there's all those things that I mentioned. Plus, I think a truly great central performance by Claire Foy.
Yes.
You know, I think she was absolutely terrific.
I think, I say this kind of guardedly, but I think that I would recommend it to people who have experienced the kind of things that Claire Foy's character does, on the basis that what her character is, amongst other things, is gaslit, right? She believes that something is happening, and she's being ignored or being told it's not. And that's something that happens particularly to women an awful lot. And it's one of the most disturbing things that can happen to you, because you're literally being kind of lied to that your reality or your experiences are not real. That's incredibly disturbing. And I think if nothing else, what this film would do is I think it is a very convincing and very expressive depiction of what that's like to happen to you, and Claire Foy's performance conveys that kind of psychosis brilliantly, and the mania of being gaslit and being told that what you're experiencing is not real and not being believed, and so I think like if you've kind of gone through that, or you think you might have gone through that, it's kind of like someone else goes, I get this.
I wouldn't go with this too far, because if you're recommending people who have, psychological...
I'm not saying it's like a cure.
No, but if I'm saying, if what you're saying is that people who've undergone this kind of psychological trauma, might really kind of enjoy what you're reliving it.
No. That's no. That's why I mean I say it guardedly. I have no. It would probably be more traumatic. I don't mean that at all. But I do mean that one thing that can be the one thing that could be beneficial if you've gone through that kind of trauma is to have someone else is to see something that suggests that someone else understands it.
Yes.
And shares that experience, and that you're not alone.
Yes.
And this film would be incredibly traumatic, but it also would say you're not alone. Someone else gets this. I think it's its greatest success is that it expresses that very convincingly to me.
Let's look more at the faults. I hated the villain. I forget what the actor's name is now.
Joshua something. Hold on.
Yeah. And I don't know why he was cast.
Because he looks creepy with a beard and rapist glasses.
Well,
Joshua Leonard.
I don't remember ever seeing him before, and he does definitely look creepy, and kind of slightly perverse with the glasses and the beard and so on. But
he's been in, from what I can tell, only independent things. He started with the Blair Witch Project.
Right. Well, I just thought he wasn't good enough.
He was one of the main ones.
And he's certainly not good enough opposite Claire Foy.
No, he's not a good enough actor.
He's like a bit of a blank. Really.
Particularly those scenes in the blue padded cell.
Yes.
Where they're actually kind of having it out. He's not good enough. He can't hold up to her. Yeah.
So that was a big problem for me. And then earlier on when we were talking about the Isle of Dogs, and I think it's such a marvelous film that we were trying to find fault with it. And one of the things that I was saying is that how the ending seemed too long because everybody's narrative gets wrapped up. In this one, kind of we barely get a sense of what happens to the protagonist, really.
Well, I mean, she's returned to the real world. The hospital having been kind of found out for the underhand shady shit that was going on there.
Yes.
She resumes her life. And she does well in her job, but then she can't escape the trauma, the psychological trauma of her stalker. So
yeah. So nothing is wrapped up in this one, really.
No, but is that a fault for you? I mean,
no, it's not a fault. I'm just kind of
no, sure.
It's the thing.
I mean, I think the ending felt appropriate to me.
It did. Well, the ending for this felt much more appropriate than the ending for Isle of Dogs. That's the kind of point I'm making, really.
Right, yeah. Come see.
But anyway, so as I said, I have mixed feelings, really, and I think I would recommend it to fans of Soderbergh. I've realized that in a very brief space of time, this man who keeps saying that he's retiring, I don't know how many films I've seen of his actually, but more than any other filmmakers, I think, because there was the Magic Mike films, both of them. Then there was the Liberace film that I saw.
Yeah. TV movie, but a film.
I saw it here at the cinema. Then there was the film with the martial arts artist. Then there was the film with Jude Law, about a medical doctor. Then there was Logan very recently.
Logan Lucky, Behind the Candelabra, Side Effects. Magic Mike, Contagion. That's going back the last 10 years, so The Informant and The Girlfriend.
Just the last 4 or 5 years.
If we go, say, since 2013.
Yes.
So 2013 was Side Effects and Behind the Candelabra.
Okay, that's right.
Leave it a couple of years, you get Logan Lucky and Unsane the last couple of years.
That's only 4? Only those 4?
If you want to go back to Magic Mike, that's 2012.
Okay, well...
So, but I mean, the point is, over the last 5 or 6 years, he's kept putting out work.
Almost a film a year. Yeah.
But I mean, yeah.
And the television series.
The one this reminded me the most of was Side Effects, which I think I had. I don't really remember, but I think I had a kind of a bad time. This reminded me of it insofar as, to me, it felt like kind of early 1990s erotic thriller, sort of this kind of stuff. Although this is not erotic, but it's the kind of. It reminded me of the kind of thriller you would get on Channel 5 late at night. Sort of in 2002, do you know what I mean?
It's
reasonably cheap B-movie psychological thriller stuff.
Because of all of these movies that we've mentioned, the only one that I really loved, that I thought was really great, and I wanted to write on it and didn't have time, was the Liberace film.
Behind the Candelabra?
Yeah, the Candelabra.
I couldn't get through that. I turned it off.
Oh, I loved it. And I liked Magic Mike as well. But, I liked it very much, actually. No, so those two I liked. All the others have been, like, real misses, really. Like, you think there's always things you like in them.
Yeah.
But actually, they're not fully realized. And actually, I would put this film in that category. It's it's an interesting try.
I mean, the last film of his that I would say I loved sort of the whole way through is, Ocean's 11, probably. I mean, everything since then, I would say I've had problems with.
Yes.
But I mean, but on the other hand, like, I will continue to see anything he makes because I think he's interesting.
I think he's
and
interesting.
he's always trying to do something interesting.
Though, I don't know. I mean, I have mixed feelings because in a way, I do think that. I do think he's always trying to do interesting things. Like, Logan was interesting and amiable and so on. And yet it felt like paper thin, really. Like, I can barely remember it now, So...
There sometimes seems to be an attitude with his films that, like, trying an experiment is enough. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and from the point of view of the audience, it's just not enough.
No. Do you remember...
Actually, anybody without a Cineworld pass who goes to see this will be really disappointed.
Yeah, you'd feel shortchanged, wouldn't you?
You would.
You want it to be more complete than it is. The film that really springs to mind is actually, for me, of this type, is not a Steven Soderbergh film. It's 127 Hours, the Danny Boyle film, which was not a bad film, but the entire film felt like an experiment in how do you film a guy under a rock.
And yet, I can remember scenes and shots of that film. I remember James Franco kind of, being in the cave and, like, breaking his foot or something, or his hand, I forget what it was. But you have like these images of the sunlight hitting the rock and him being trapped. Like, there are things that actually, that film is much more successful at creating things that stay with you, right? Like with Logan, which was just released.
Logan Lucky, which
was released this year, I think, last year, within a year, right? Like, all I remember is a kind of a shaggy amiableness, but I can't remember more than a feeling, So
they
that's
don't stay with you very much, do they?
Well, not with me anyway.
Not with me either. The last one I would say that actually stayed with me is Magic Mike, because I would watch those dance scenes over and over. I thought they were fucking great.
Yes.
I think actually the plot of Magic Mike, the character stuff, is pretty dull. But it's those centerpiece scenes that what that film really is about. But like I said, the last film of his that the whole way through I thought was great and memorable was Ocean's 11.
Yes.
The other Ocean's films I like as well, but not as much.
I like them all. Actually, I think I saw them recently. You brought them up.
I was watching them again recently.
Okay, and then because of you, I saw them again. And they're just such fun, right? Like, and they're kind of glamorous and expensive looking and sleek, and actually, it's so in a way it's like comfort food, but it is very comforting. Whereas actually this, it's even the images lack calories. I am in love with this idea of Guillermo del Toro's, right? That kind of, film is visual, it's audiovisual, but the visual for him is the most important thing. And that, that films have to offer protein for the eye, right? And it's very interesting because in this film, there's a lot of attempts to create that. But I just think that a lot of those scenes are constructed because they look neat or different or unusual, right? Or look what you can capture. Look how you can film, this room from this angle to look like that, rather than this is filming it this way from this angle, etc., is expressing X, right? Like I think the thought, like there's too much of, oh, isn't this neat, rather than how do we best express X, right?
The one part of this film which did achieve that was the scene we mentioned earlier where she's been drugged by her stalker, and she enters a state of psychosis, and there's a shot of her from behind as she's kind of tearing around a room, breaking stuff and screaming. There's a shot that tracks her straight from behind her head, and it's superimposed with a shot on her face.
Yeah,
and
which
so
only peaks periodically.
well, they're kind of there half and half. But you see the one from behind her more because you see the chairs and stuff running around. But then you recognise her face because you kind of, so you see it in the back of the head, and you can also see sort of the ceiling tiles.
That's a great shot.
It's a brilliant little sequence.
I mean, there are lots of things like that are very intriguing actually in this film. And that's why I would recommend it to fans of Soderbergh, because you can see how he's developing things and he's working with things and he's trying things out. And actually, there is a kind of a pleasure, and I'm willing to lend my attention to artists just experimenting, and I appreciated Matt Damon being there, and and so on.
I thought he unsettled the film just by being a famous guy. It's a cameo.
It's a cameo, and actually it's a Matt Damon role in the cameo, and so on. But I did appreciate him lending his support to this, actually.
Oh, sure.
And I mean, it was a pleasure to see him. I think when you say it unsettled it, like the film did need a jolt, because I looked at my watch like 3 times, so I appreciated him being in it.
Oh, fair enough. My perspective was it was something that took me out of the film rather than kind of energized it.
Well,
2 different worlds. You and I.
Well, that's for sure. But yeah, okay. He didn't shoot this film, which I thought was interesting because he is famous for doing his own cinematography, isn't he?
I think so, yeah.
And this was done by someone else, and it was not good.
No. Well, I mean, was it the other guys? Let me look at the cinematographer and see if it was like his first film or something. It was like, I don't know. He's a student being given a chance or something. Cinematography. Oh no, cinematography was by Steven Soderbergh as Peter Andrews.
Oh right, okay.
So pseudonymical.
Okay, well that's interesting.
So,
anyway, it was not. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it was lit.
No, so. The lighting was not superb.
And yet, obviously, he's a very knowledgeable. But it boggles the mind that this lighting was something that he chose to execute, right? Like, because as we were talking about those scenes with Claire Foy and what's the actor's name? I mean, it borders on the racist, really. So if
Jay Farrow.
Farrow. So if he was satisfied with that lighting, he's got a problem.
Yeah, or maybe, like I say, maybe he put it down to a limitation of the camera and thought, well, there we go. I mean, that's not, which is also kind of not excusable.
Well, no, because
I mean, that in that one shot, you really could not see Jay Farrow's features, and it felt very.
And he was.
Balanced.
I mean, it's a 2-shot
Yeah.
where both characters are important, and you literally cannot see the features of one of them. I mean, that's terrible. So I don't care if it's fucking Steve Soderbergh. Lousy lighting.
No, I agree with you.
Anyway.
Or bad casting. I'm joking.
Yes. Well, he was very good.
Yeah, he was very good. I believed him. What do you think about the kind of? It does get very kind of B-movie-ish, doesn't it? With the sort of conspiracy aspect to it. That's the idea that the uncovering of the kind of criminal enterprise almost at the end. And the idea that Jay Farrow's character was an undercover journalist who happened to lose his life. When it gets to the point where the stalker has him tied up in the basement and then doses him with heroin, the film lost me for a bit there.
It did, and actually, I also thought, I mean, not to pursue this kind of racist thing too much, but let's say had that part been played by a named white actor, they would have given him something more to do, right? He would have resisted. He would have rescued her. He would have, because that's actually almost like the third most important role in the film, right? You know, so there's the Claire Foy character, there's a stalker, and then I would argue that he and the mother are, the other
share a tier below.
Yeah, below. So to
possibly
to just bump him off like that.
Oh, to be fair, he bumps her off as well.
The mother.
The mother, yeah.
But the mother has more.
I'm not sure she does have more to do, really. She shows up.
No, she has more, because not more in terms of lines, but more in terms of there's a whole emotional scene with the daughter, and about getting in touch and being able to help, right? And the thing that happened with the father, and you get a whole there's a whole emotion thing, whereas he's just kind of plot, really.
A little bit, but he's also someone who...
He's a plot function.
Up to a point, but he's also... She does feel a certain connection with him. She wants to see him again when they eventually get out, and he's a support mechanism for her. He's the only one in there who seems to understand her.
Okay, like... I get that up to a point.
They don't have the background.
There's a nice banter, but I also do think that if it was a white actor, with a bit of a name, they would have given him more to do.
Maybe not. His role felt appropriate to me.
Well, I thought it was racist.
But what I was getting at more was that the film feels, if a little kind of highly expressive, the film feels realistic in terms of its depiction of sort of psychosis and the once you accept that the stalker has managed to get himself a job in the hospital to follow her, once he gets to the point where he's torturing and killing a guy, that's where it starts to get like so overwrought that I'm thinking that this is no longer keeping me believing the reality of the film. Because on the other hand, he's such a weed, this guy. Like, how does he capture him? And would he really have the kind of confidence? There's this whole thing towards the end of he's a virgin and
it's a very badly...
Will he prove himself by raping someone else in front of her?
It's a very badly acted character, so you can't tell, because Claire Foy brings such humor and intelligence and panic, and resistance. She just does so much with his role that, acting opposite him. Now, maybe if the same guy had been played by Woody Harrelson or something like that, with the same lines, it might have been a completely different thing.
Or Matt Damon.
He could have brought out the pervy...
Matt Damon could have done it. Joaquin Phoenix could have done it. He could have gone straight from You Were Never Really Here into this with the same beard and body.
My God, you can't even mention the films in the same phrase.
I know.
Really. Let's end this really, because...
I would give it a guarded recommendation on the basis of it having certain qualities and a certain kind of convincing portrayal of paranoia and sort of psychosis.
I would recommend it to people who don't have to pay for it. So if you have a Cineworld Pass, go. If you're interested in Steve Soderbergh as a director, go. If you're interested in Claire Foy, it's truly a great performance, go. If you don't fit into any of these categories, you will feel very shortchanged.
Yeah. But in other words, of the three films we've seen today, I would recommend it the least. I'd recommend it below...
Oh, no, me, I would recommend the Spielberg one the least.
No, I'd recommend it below Ready Player One.
Ugh.
You get more for your money with Ready Player One.
You get nothing out of Ready Player One.
Well, you didn't.
I didn't. I would choose this would be my second choice.
Okay. Well, Ready Player One had better lighting. You could see the black people.
The image was very thin and very unsatisfying. And it's a dumb movie. This at least has intelligence.
Some intelligence. I think it slips slightly into nuttiness at points, but yeah.
All right, so
but of the three films, see Isle of Dogs first.
Yes. So thank you very much. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, Facebook, and Twitter.
Well done.
All right. Let's end it here.
Yeah.